Hey you guys, I'm the Zodiac Reader, or Rosie Jenner, and today I'm going to be filming my April wrap-up. So if you don't know me, I started a psychology channel, Rosie Jenner. I have now graduated in psychology and have a lot of time to make videos. I'm sorry about the weird lighting going on. I had to close this, otherwise it is absolutely just white light. So today I'm going to be filming my first of hopefully many booktube videos since I'm getting back into reading, and I'm hoping it will motivate me even more. So in April I read 7 books. I have a lot of fatigue at the moment, so I've just been, whizzing through all of my physical books as audiobooks because, oh my god, my physical T-bar is about... My physical TBR is about 200 books. So I've been zooming through those as a treat for myself for graduating, really not doing that much work. That I read in April, or listened to, was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. I hope that's right, just glancing at my notes to the right. And I had such high expectations for this. I have heard so many good things about this book. It's very short. I believe it might be like 95 pages or something. So it really didn't take that long at all. And I gave it 3 stars. And I'll talk to you about the book and then why I rated it 3 stars. It's sold as sort of like an Afro-space adventure. It's based on African culture, so Binti, our main character, is from a tribe of people who never really leave that area because of their traditional values, and no one really seems to understand them. But Binti really, really wants to go to this amazing intergalactic college, and she gets onto the course, that's not a spoiler, runs away, and craziness ensues. And I gave it 3 stars because I just felt there was so much untouched. Binti had a lot of potential, but it felt like someone was giving me the bones of a story rather than a short story. Binti really needed to be a whole novel because it was that good, but also very empty at the same time. But I really enjoyed it, so I would highly recommend listening to it. And 3 stars isn't bad. I would definitely recommend it to everyone. And I think about it all the time. I just feel like I was left with so many answers. I believe it is a series, but that first book needed to be a bit bulkier. There were a lot of things that I was like, really? The second book that I read in April was The Lost Village by Camilla Stern, I believe. And again, very high expectations. I think I heard this on Jordaline's channel, or maybe it was Gabby Reads. But I really wanted to read it. I am going through such a horror phase at the moment, and The Lost Village really appealed to me. It's basically about this girl whose grandma is one of like 900 people who go missing just randomly from this town, just up and leave. No one knows where they are. There's no trace of them. And the main film person is one of the ancestors. Wow, I'm so awkward. So basically she goes in with a camera crew, and it plays out sort of like the Blair Witch Project, where things start happening around the town that they are filming, and it builds up in that way. I rate this book a 4-star because I did feel like the ending was a bit quick. It didn't really answer all of my questions. I think it did play out really well, and the way that it's written is absolutely stunning. I felt like I was standing right there. But the ending was just not what I wanted, I guess. So then I read The Ruins. I know if you have read horror or like horror, or if you watch anything to do with horror on BookTube, you've almost certainly heard of The Ruins. You might have even seen the film. It came out in 2006, and it's about 4 American explorers going into the jungle to try and find some Mayan ruins, hence the name. And wow, I rated this a 4 out of 5 stars, but I think really it is a 5-star book. I just felt a little bit empty after I left it, so I'll probably change that in the future. If I reread it, it will probably come out of 5 stars. Wow, it's insane. So these explorers go into the forest, and despite warnings and despite everything that literally foreshadows the whole thing from the start, they just don't listen, and they go in anyway because, you know, that's what us white folks do. And it's absolutely brilliant. It deals with like a lot of different subjects. So there's like language barriers, which is a huge problem in the situation they end up in. There are, you know, cultures, and there's just so much. Ooh, there's so much that stops them from getting out of this stupid hill. But it's beautifully written. It's scary. It's gory. It has all of the milestones that you want a horror to hit. I'm glad that the ending wasn't what I expected, but I also kind of did. It was like an ending that you don't want to happen, but happens anyway, but also in a satisfying way. I can't explain it, but I loved it. And I just think that this book is phenomenal, and Scott Smith is a great writer, although I've heard that the film isn't great. So the fourth book that I read was The Hole by Ha Young Pyeon, I believe he's called. And it's about a man who basically gets into a car crash with his wife passes away, and he's left paralysed. And the only person in his life to take care of him after leaving hospital is his mother-in-law. This has been described as the Asian version of Misery. I haven't finished Misery. I have been trying to for a hot minute. I'm not a huge fan of Stephen King. I know that's stupid, but some of his language is unnecessary and not a fan. Anyway, so The Hole follows this guy who's paralysed in bed with his mother-in-law, and we kind of explore whether it's abuse and neglect. We explore this obsession with a hole in the garden, and how this man is basically being treated by his mother-in-law, whether it's care or not, whether it's obsession or not, whether it's, I know you're not meant to call it anymore, but I sort of thought it was sort of a Munchausen by proxy situation, and it was just so interesting. And I didn't think that this was going to be like a higher rated read for me. The whole thing sort of felt like 3 stars. It wasn't particularly, you know, it wasn't a particularly new concept because it was almost exactly like Misery. It wasn't particularly inspiring, but the way it was written and the way that their relationship and his relationships in the past evolve as you read was just so interesting. And when it finished, it felt like such a rounded off story. Like, you know, when a story just feels finished, like that's like so satisfying that I had to give it an extra star. So I gave it 4 stars. And I mean, just read it. Like, I feel like anyone could read it and enjoy it. It's not particularly horrible, which is why I didn't want to rate it highly. I was kind of disappointed at the fact that it was almost all psychological and him thinking. There's not really any horror in it, not much gore at all, but it was around a story, and if you think of it as literary fiction, it's a very good story. So next I read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, and I have seen a lot of controversy around this. I have seen that almost everyone has read this by now. I believe it came out last year, and wow. I'm going to say almost exactly what Noelle said about A Little Life. Is that the one? I don't know, but yeah, don't watch it if you're not... Don't watch it. Don't read it if you aren't comfortable with these sorts of things. It's sort of like Lolita when she's grown up and how that's affected her, and it is harrowing. Like, the themes and the way she talks about the perpetrator and how it's treated, and the way that the victims come forward eventually in this internal struggle, and also sort of pleasure that comes from it being that age. it's so traumatizing to read that I cannot stop thinking about it. And every time I see the cover now, I have to swipe on because I know that's it, I'm going to go into the spiral, I'm going to be thinking about this book. And for that reason, I know it should be a 5-star book because, wow, does it play on your mind? It's incredibly inventive. It's a conversation that really needs to be held about consent and what it means to be young and beautiful and lustful, but also a minor, and the role that people who look after us play. The guy just, it's just a really nasty read. I really wanted to give it 5 stars, but it was so triggering for me. I had to put it down so many times, and I know she wasn't romanticizing the situation. It is not a love story at all, and the author is very clear about that. But sweet mother of Jesus, I don't know, it made me very uncomfortable. So I would not read it if you have a past trauma of any kind, to be quite honest. But yeah, I mean, wow. So after My Dark Vanessa, I had to pick up something that was light and fluffy, and of course I had to go with one of my favourite children's writers of all time, Nicholas Skinner. I read Storm. I have been waiting to read this since it came out, and now Starbound is out and I am so behind, but I absolutely loved Bloom, so I thought Storm was going to be perfect. I did give Storm a 4.5, but I rated it 5 on Goodreads. Goodreads, please give us half stars ASAP. But it was so good. Like, the way that Nicholas Skinner writes about really serious things from the perspective of children really shows you how children are people. One of my main values, I guess, as a psychologist is that children, when they are going through something, A, they aren't dumb, and B, they are experiencing that. They do have emotions, they have experiences that feel very big at the minute, and definitely do give them life lessons. So whenever someone says, oh, but that guy doesn't have as many experiences as me, I don't care. They went through that, they learned something from it, and if you can learn something from their experience, then that's great too. So Storm is about this girl who, no spoilers here, basically dies at the start of the book, and 100 years later wakes up in her home and is a ghost walking around her now tourist attraction old house. And honestly, like, it kind of, I love ghosts, I love ghost stories, I love haunted houses, so for a childish play on this and like childish relationships to then turn into something I did not expect at all was actually so good and just enthralling to read. It's beautifully written, as Nicholas Skinner's books always are, very enchanting. I absolutely love the British settings that she puts her characters in, and the narrators are always great for her books. The reason I gave it 4.5 is because I don't think anything will match my love for Bloom. Bloom is me as a novel. I am obsessed with things like Day of the Triffids, the covers of House of Hollow and Horrid. I am obsessed with that kind of atmosphere. So, oh my goodness, sorry about the lie. I mean, Bloom is just so perfect. So I didn't rate Storm as highly, but I definitely recommend for anyone, literally anyone, even if you don't like middle grade and you think you're too grown up, just stunning. And obviously, as someone who wants to specialise in child psychology, wow, did I have to love it. What's happening? The final book that I read in April was The Familiars by Stacey Hall, and yes, of course, I am going to read The Foundling very soon. I might even put that in my May TBR, but yes, Stacey Hall's. I don't like historical fiction, so I just couldn't give this a 5 out of 5. There's just something about historical fiction that I find kind of boring. But this story is absolutely wonderful. I wish that they'd have focused sort of on the end arc of the story a bit more. And I do think that there could have been more of the folklore that they were talking about, because obviously it's called The Familiars, and I would have liked just a pinch more of magic, because that is my jam. But it's a historical fiction, so of course we're not going too into fantasy, and I just thought it was a really good story. It's about this woman called Fleetwood Shuttleworth, and she is married to a man who is very wealthy, and she's had a few miscarriages, so that's a trigger warning for you. It can be very triggering. There's an allusion to sexual assault and child adverse experiences, but it's only mentioned in like a few lines, where it's sort of like, oh, you knew, and it's, yeah, so just prepping you for that. There is some mention of it. There's some allusion that she has some childhood trauma that she won't talk about until the very end. And there is a lot of talk about miscarriage and fears of miscarrying. So if that triggers you, I would probably give this book a miss, because it's basically her trying to keep her pregnancy and therefore going to a woman who may or may not be magic, or a witch, or whatever you want to call her. And as people start seeing these women walking around with their beasts, there is just rumours everywhere about there being familiars who are, you know, if you've seen Sabrina, if you know anything about witchcraft, familiars have always been a huge part of the lore there, and they are basically the spawn of devils who are there to protect you, or that's what it is in the familiars anyway. I mean, need I say more? It's very enticing. The plot is incredible. The end bit gave me such To Kill a Mockingbird vibes, and my favourite part of To Kill a Mockingbird is the court scenes, and you just gotta love it. Like, I mean, it's that good. So yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5, but I feel like if there was more magic realism in it, I would have definitely given it a 5 out of 5. I just don't like historical fiction very much. Thank you for watching my first bookish video on this channel. I am very excited to keep reading with you. I will be uploading a May TBR and a book haul from the last month very shortly. So yeah, I hope to see you again soon. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you rated them, what you thought of them, what do you think other readers should know about them, and I will see you soon. Bye!